Hello, my name is Bob Van Landingham. I'm a docent at Historic Spanish Point. New docents develop their own tours. I want to thank Sean Green for helping me develop this tape. He was the cameraman. A couple of things I need to mention. One was that I failed to mention the orange marmalade that John Webb developed as a saleable product, and I'm sure I left out other important facts that you can add to your tour. A couple of things about the particular day. We had a group of school children on the premises, so I was dodging them, and where I like to have the packing house and introduce the Webbs at the packing house first, I had to go to the chapel and the cemetery and then to the packing house. The other problem was that the window to the past video was not operating, and so we had to do the best I could to narrate that instead of the video. I hope that the next hour and 10 minutes is worthwhile to you. Thank you.
Put makeup on our faces.
Oh yeah, we do that. Good morning and welcome to Historic Spanish Point. I am Bob Van Landingham. I'm a volunteer, one of about 200 that work here at the historic site for the Gulf Coast Heritage Association, which is a private nonprofit organization, and they operate this as a museum. We're going to take a 2-hour walking tour. There will be a lot of stops along the way. We'll walk about a mile, so we're not going to overdo you. There will be a restroom and water fountain about halfway through, so if you need a drink of water, right there is a good drink right now. We're going to talk about 3 groups of people. Oh, wait a minute, I have one other thing. No smoking while we're on the tour. This place could go up in a heartbeat. I'll tell you, it's so dry. We're going to talk about 3 groups of people that use this land. We have 30 acres of 130 acres that John Webb and his family homesteaded in 1867. Then they found the traces of this prehistoric people that were here some 4,000 years ago to 1,000 years ago. And then in 1910, Mrs. Potter Palmer bought this land from the Webb family, and she made this her winter estate. So we have those 3 groups of people, and they all use the land, and we have things kind of mixed up, so we can't talk about them in chronological order, but I will refer to those 3 groups as we go along. Okay? Very good. Ask any questions you have as we progress. I'll do the very best I can to give you the answer. If I don't have it, no problem. We'll try. Very good. Let's walk this way. Mrs. Palmer, when she was here, she wanted things pretty. And she was willing to spend her money to have unusual, pretty things. One of the things that she started was this ornamental water pond that we have here. And this green plant it looks like a scum, but you'll see the individual leaves on it. Yeah, so it's not just a algae or a scum, but an individual plant. It's called duckweed. Yeah, the ducks love it. Consequently, the name for it. We get occasional alligator in here or other wildlife, but it's a freshwater pond that Mrs. Palmer started when she was here. Thank you. Let's come on down this way. She made a lot of money alive, didn't she? When the Webb family came here to Homestead, this place was all grown up. It was just very, very rough land. And one of the early things, the first things they had to do was clear land to raise a garden and start their crops. And this was one of the areas that they were clearing where they found some human bones. And John Webb was well enough connected that he was able to send those to the Smithsonian Institute and have them identified. This was around 1868, 1869 time frame. Consequently, they identified these as this prehistoric people that lived here thousands of years ago. They established the Palmer, or the Osprey collection, and so we have a collection at the Smithsonian Institute of things that came from this prehistoric people. In the 1959 to 1962 time frame, the Palmers invited the Florida Archaeology Department to come to the site. What?
It's no 1800?
No, this is 1959 to 1962. The Florida Archaeology Department were invited here by the Palmer family. And they turned up this Indian burial ground right here, or this mound, and in that mound they found, they determined that there were some 300 bodies buried here. And right on top, just under the surface, was a headless alligator and 3 dogs. Okay? That showed that these people left. When they left, that they left of their own accord. They weren't in a real big hurry. They planned to leave the area. And so they left some protection for their loved ones that were buried. Okay? Kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, let's walk on down here. Okay, have you heard the term midden? Okay, what is a midden? Oh, okay.
Is it that island that
Yeah, but where'd they come from? Why? Okay.
they left all the
This
stripes?
is
I thought it was the largest
the
garbage
midden.
dump in the world.
That is exactly right.
It's a
The
garbage
midden is a garbage dump. Okay? And these prehistoric people, just where they lived and where they ate, they threw their trash out. They threw when they were done with their pottery or it gotten broken, like it was thrown in there. Their tools, they were thrown in there. And all the shells and bones and anything from the table scraps were thrown in this midden. We have 2 areas of these middens on our property here. One is back on the north side of the property. I'll show it to you later, but it's in the form of a horseshoe, and it covers about 4 acres. It's about 15 to 16 feet deep. You can imagine the layers of shells and trash that are in that. Okay, the other one is this one. It starts right over in here and runs a quarter of a mile right along the page. This area, it is about 40 to 50 feet wide, a quarter of a mile long, and 15. It takes a lot of eating too. Later on in the tour, where we'll show you a cut in the movie, and you can see these layers and layers. These are two of these mounds were all over Florida, but in the early days. But have you? But these are preserved, and fortunately we have them on this property. The other thing I want to tell you is that we took this gift for all day. So if you want to come back here after the tour is over and look at any of this, anything that's unlocked, you're welcome to do that until 5 o'clock this evening. Okay? Very good. If you need to go out to lunch, feel free to do that. And just tell them at the gate that you want to come back in, and they'll samples of the pottery. This was a decoration on that alligator, that kind of a necklace sort of thing. Okay? Let's go this way. And then there were 5 children. The oldest was a daughter, Anna. Then Will was 19. Then there were 3 younger ones. Lizzie and Jimmy. Okay? They came, well, this is all part of the story that goes down there. But they came from New York because of the mother's health. And she came back to health and lived until 1884. Now, she was the first one. The second one actually buried in this cemetery. The first one was the youngest daughter, who married a boat builder, Frank Duffel. And he came down here and joined the Webb family. I'll tell you about him a little bit later. But Frank Duffel was buried up in that corner between his 2 wives. He married the youngest daughter, and she was pregnant and fell down the steps in the homestead and died the next day. And so then, 18 months later, he married the middle-red daughter, Lizzie. They're buried both up there in that corner with Frank in the middle. And then John is over in this corner, the father, is over in this corner with his 2 wives. Eliza was the wife he brought down here. Emily was the sister. When Eliza passed away, Emily goes home. She goes back to New York. He was there about 3 years. John was on a trip up there, and he saw her and brought her back down here. And they lived here until 1908. They died within 6 months of each other. But they were very instrumental in making this place work. Right here is Marguerite Webb and Will Webb. Marguerite was Will's wife. Now this is a community cemetery, and you'll see names like Roberts and Blackburn and Conrad and those kind of names. So it is a community affair. John Webb was a very community-minded guy. Over there, that one with the M on it, that is the last one buried here. She was the youngest granddaughter of the Webb family, and her name was Mabel. She was buried in 1993, the last one. I'll tell you a little bit about her when we get inside. I want you to notice the fern on the oak, fallen oak there. That is resurrection fern. If we get a rain, the next day that will be real green and lush. Now we haven't had a rain in a little over a week. We'll have it this weekend. Next week will be green. But it is drying up, and it'll get brown as these leaves. But a rain will just bring it back. Fantastic. Okay, let's go inside. John Webb was a very unusual pioneer guy. He was very well educated. He had been, he was a college graduate. He had taught college level chemistry and mathematics, and he was a druggist. He had been a druggist. He was also a part-time farmer. So he was quite an entrepreneur, okay? I'll tell you a little bit more about him later, but to bring this up to date, he opened a Webb Winter Resort in about 1890, something right along in there after they had been down. Oh no, it had to be earlier than that. It was around 1870. He opened this Webb Winter Resort. Okay, one of the guests in 1892 was Mary Sherrill. Mary was a young girl, about 20 years old, that had recently graduated from the music conservatory in Boston, and she had tuberculosis. Her family lived in Louisville, Kentucky. And so Mary's family said, or decided that the southern climate would help Mary's health. So Mother brought Mary down here, and she only lived for 5 weeks. But in that time, Mary fell in love with this place, and her family wanted to build a chapel, or provide a chapel in Mary's memory. And this was the area right up here near the cemetery where Mary used to come in the evening, and it was, the orange trees were provided an aroma that was nice. She could see the water from here at that time. And so when she had passed away, her family sent $441 to John Webb to have a chapel built. Another guest was an architect. A guest of the resort was an architect. He designed the chapel. Okay? Mary's friends sent these 6, let's see, it was, her friends from Louisville sent these 6 windows down that are on the sides, and they're the original. The building actually collapsed, caved in the 1960s. The front window was crushed at that time, but when the chapel was rebuilt, Mabel was the one that was able to get the windows brought back to the site and have them installed here. The other thing that she saved that was original was the bell. I didn't get to ring the bell for you, but I will as we leave. And it is a large bell, as you'll hear. It was sent down here by her friends from the music conservatory. Now, the bell arrived on the day that Mabel was born in 1895. Okay? Mrs. Sherrill asked Marguerite Webb to name the baby Mary Bell in honor of her daughter and the bell. Well, like you girls, she didn't want somebody else telling her how to name her daughter. So she did name her May Bell, M-A-Y, capital B-E-L-L-E. Well, the kids, they changed that to May Belly. She didn't like that, so she changed her name to Mabel. When Mabel was 20 years old, the chapel was owned by the Palmer family. At that time, she was married in the chapel. They had the procession with the bell ringing and so forth. So then, when the chapel was falling in, Mabel and her husband retrieved the bell and got it stored, actually used in another church in Osprey. The 6 windows were taken out and stored in a museum in Sarasota. The other 2 things that are original are these 2 chairs up here. Everything everything else is of period, but it is not the original stuff. The chapel sits on the exact same spot. It's the same size. It's built just like it was in the 1890s. Okay?
When was it rebuilt?
It was rebuilt in 1984, I think it was. The only other thing that I know of that is different is this bird nest that's right up there. But she's the one that remembered what it looked like. Oh, the other thing I meant to tell you about Mabel was that after the chapel was rebuilt, and she and her husband, second husband, restated their vows in this chapel. And she said she was the only person in the world that was married in the chapel twice, 70 years apart. She always said that she had a very close connection to the bell. Incidentally, she and her husband, both of her husbands, lived right around the area all her life, and they were a big part of getting the Gulf Coast Heritage Association established to run this museum.
Are there any of your children still involved? Or?
Some of Mabel's children are around, yes. One came on my tour last year and corrected me several times. I knew you'd like that. Do you have any questions? Okay, let's be a little more detail about the Webb family that came here in 1867, and they homesteaded. They carved out 130 acres here to homestead this land. The Homestead Act came about right after the Civil War to spread the Americans out on the land, and they were living at the time in Utica, New York. As I said, John was had been a college professor. He had been a pharmacist, and he was a part-time farmer. Eliza, his wife, was in very poor health because of asthma. And the doctor had said if they came south, that it would be good for her health. Fortunately, she came back to health and lived until 1884. And she passed away when they were had a forest fire, and she died of exhaustion the next day. But they came down here and had to clear the land, and John had studied the west coast of Florida. He knew that that's where he wanted to come. When they were on a ship from New York down to Key West, at Key West they got off the ship for a short time, and there he ran into a Spanish trader that told him about this high point of land on the Little Sarasota Bay that had fresh water. It was an artesian spring located out where that horseshoe midden was that I told you about, okay? That was an attractive feature because, of course, fresh water was a biggie for the family. The Spanish trader told him about this, and so when he got up here, he named the place after this Spanish trader, and that's where the name Spanish Point came from, okay? They got back on the ship, came up, and they got off at Manatee, which is up north of here, and actually is Bradenton now, and they stayed in a rooming house there for a few months while they picked out this place to establish their home. He knew that they could get a quick cash crop with sugar cane, and he knew that the citrus would grow real fast. So in the course of about 10 years there, he had about 300 orange trees, he had 50 lemon and lime trees, he had a big plot of sugar cane, and he had this big garden that he was growing. There was a lot of seafood at the time. The fish and the the wildlife around here was very plentiful, so they could have plenty to eat. I want to play a audio here for you.
Welcome to my citrus packing house. My name is John Webb. In 1867, I moved my family to Spanish Point from New York. We bought this piece of land on the bay and planted Orange Street. Let me tell you a little about how the packing house works. After the fruit is picked, we bring it to the packing house in crates on a wagon. It comes right through these doors. We found that most fruit looks better after washing, so we carefully wash it with seawater and a little detergent. The fruit then needs to be dried or cured so that the skin becomes tougher and can be shipped without damage. We lay the fruit out in a single layer on these shelves. Air moves around the fruit, making the skin more leathery and flexible. Next, we size the fruit. Oranges roll down this trough and drop into 3 bins. That way, fruit of the same size is packed together. We assemble our own shipping crates here. The Florida Fruit Growers Association decided on a standard size for crates, and that's the size we use. Using a stencil, we then mark each crate with our name and town. Packing the fruit comes next. We wrap each fruit in a piece of tissue paper. We follow the pattern so that each box contains the same number of oranges. It's important the fruit is packed tightly so it doesn't move around during shipping. It may look like there are too many oranges in the crate since they stick out of the top a little, but when we wire on the lid, it will squeeze the fruit together so they won't bounce around and get damaged. After the crates are packed, we take them out these doors. I can load fruit right from the dock on our boat division. From here, we can sail to Key West or Cedar Key, where the fruit is sent on to northern markets. This beautiful bay is one of the reasons we decided to settle here. I want to thank you for visiting my packing house. I hope you have enjoyed learning about the business of getting our citrus from grove to market.
One of the things that he mentioned there was he loaded the fruit onto his ship, the Vision. The Vision was a boat that they actually built on site. But I think it's interesting to think about how necessary the boat was to these pioneer people. If you lived in this area and you wanted to go north or south by land, you had to go at least 10 miles inland because of all the water and the rivers and the streams and so forth. So instead of doing that, they used a boat. They bought their first boat when they were at Manatee, and just getting established here, they bought a small boat that they could haul their materials down here to this point. Then they bought a boat, the Ruby, which was about a 5-ton boat, and they used it until they built the Vision, which was a 10-ton boat. Now, the way they built this is interesting. This guy I talked about, Frank Guptill, he was a Marine insurance investigator who they ran into when they were on a trip up at Manatee. He was looking for a shipwreck here along the coast. They invited him to come down to visit, and he came and he just never left. He homesteaded a little plot of ground down south of us, and but he married the youngest daughter about 5 years after he got here, and then she passed away and he married the second daughter, so he stayed right in the family. We have a house on the site that we will see that he built. It's a work of art. He was really a craftsman, and he is the guy that taught the Webbs how to build boats, and you'll see some of his work. But he became quite an integral part of the family for years and years and years, and was buried, as I said, up there in the cemetery. Okay, John was quite an entrepreneur. In addition to the sugar cane that they squeezed and made a syrup, and the fruit that they shipped from here, and they shipped a lot of garden products as well. one of the guys from the Smithsonian Institute was down here visiting, and he said, you know, John, the Northerners would pay money to come down here and stay for the winter. And so John established the Webb Winter Resort, and for $35 a month, you could come down here and get room and board. Laundry was extra, but that included the boat trip from Manatee down to the site, and it included the boat trip back, okay? We will see a lot more of John's boats and the boat building activity over on the north side of the area today when we're over there in a little while.
Is the motel still available?
No. John passed away in 1908, and his family, the children, ran the resort for another 2 years, and they closed it down. And then Mrs. Potter Palmer came in and she bought this land. Yes?
Why the structure with all the cross pieces between the beams? I mean, I've never seen, they're staggered.
On the walls.
Oh, that is staggered?
I mean, nobody ever puts that many bricks in them. Was it used for some purpose or what?
I don't know.
I mean, assuming they rebuilt this as it was.
This was rebuilt, yes. As it was, it's on a different look. It's about 10 feet from the original location, but it is built on the same way that it was before.
Never saw one.
I don't know why they're staggered that way.
Maybe they used it for the fruit, I
Um,
suppose.
Well, they could have, but it was,
Can't drive nails into them if they're straight.
well, I see some of them are toenails instead of, depending on how wide. Mrs. Palmer was the widow of Potter Palmer of the Palmer House in Chicago. He had made his money after the big Chicago fire. He mortgaged himself to the hilt, and he rebuilt downtown Chicago. And that is the source of his income. He was quite a bit older than she was, and he had passed away approximately 8 years before she came down here, when she was 60 years old. Okay? She was left with $7 or $8 million. She had 2 sons, Potter Jr. and Honore. And she put half of her money in a trust fund for the 2 boys, and she brought the rest of it down here, and she started buying land. The first land she bought was about 10 acres just north of this property, where she built, there was a small house on the 10 acres, and she expanded that to a 31-room house. And then she started buying other land and ended up buying 90,000 acres of this area around here, which represents about a quarter of Sarasota County. 90,000. I heard that she had another 120,000 acres up around Tampa. So, but she had about $4 million to spend on it, and land was selling $1.25 an acre. Okay? No, she had 35 people around this area she wanted things pretty. You see, she was an entrepreneur and quite an organizational type lady. She had learned her business tactics from her husband and her father when she was her father was a French extraction. He moved into Chicago, and that's where they got together. And after the fire in Chicago, she's the one that encouraged her husband to go into debt to rebuild Chicago, and that's the way he made his money. He also had been in the mercantile business, but that all burned down. Okay, so she was appointed by the President of the United States for the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago.
Who was president?
To run the women's exhibit.
Who was president then?
I don't know.
Okay.
That would be interesting. I could look that up. But anyway,
Cleveland?
I believe. I'm not sure. She did a lot of travel. She traveled to Paris and to New York, and she was quite a socialite. And her travels were reported in the newspapers in all these different places. So, an unusual person. She wanted things pretty. She had, as I said, 35 people here to keep up her grounds. She wanted a bunch of these urns, like that one. That's about the only one we have left, but she wanted that for her flowers. She also imported a lot of plants. At one time they say that there was a railroad car loaded with plants that they brought down here. Some of them are good, some of them are too good. We'll talk about that as we go along.
Some cause some problems.
Yes, because they were imported, they don't have any native pests. Okay? Let's move out here, we'll look at one. One of the things that Mrs. Palmer brought in was the ear tree. Are you ready, Sean?
Yep.
Okay. The ear tree, it's named because of the shape of the pod. If you'd like to pass that around, you can. The problem with it doesn't have any local pest. And so consequently, we have these growing quite a few different areas on the land here. It's a deciduous tree. Right now it has lost its leaves, and you'll notice the Spanish moss in the tree. That is an air plant. It does not take anything except support from the tree. It gains all its nutrients and moisture from the air, but it likes this tree because the leaves are not real thick, and it allows a lot of sunlight into the tree.
Will it turn green eventually?
Yes, yes. In a couple months, it will have a full complement of green leaves, but they're quite small. The individual leaves are quite small. Any other questions?
Where's this native to? Where was it?
It's Brazil.
Brazil.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's walk out this way. This is the Duchesne lawn. Duchesne was a French landscape architect that Mrs. Palmer engaged to help her design this. Actually, she used this area to experiment with grass seed for her cattle farm that she established up near the Mayaca State Park. She had about 15,000 acres devoted to the cattle ranch, and she had some 2,200 head of cattle. But she was always doing something very aggressive in her activities. And for instance, in her cattle ranch, she was the first in the area to dip the cattle for ticks. She also then fenced them in so they wouldn't mingle with the other cattle and trade ticks. But the other ranchers didn't like that because it was supposed to be open range. So she had those troubles. But this was the Duchesne lawn. She planted those Queen's palms along the sides, these two clumps of Phoenix reclinata on either side, and she built the portal. She planted two Washingtonian palms right here, and she had a plan for a big mansion that sits right where that White House is going to sit, or what that White House sits now. Our property line is right here between this, right on the fence, and so that's a part of the Oaks subdivision now. But we know that this plan that she left was for this property. See, she only lived here 8 years. She died in 1918 of breast cancer after she'd come in 1910. So she got a lot done in that 8 years. In addition to the cattle ranch, she had 1,000 acres near Sarasota that was a pork and poultry farm. And one of her activities that she liked was to load her grandkids in a Model T and drive 18 miles up to the Mayaca State Park area to the cattle farm. Okay?
Okay.
Let's move out this way. Okay, this is the lychee field. We have 2 lychee trees left. One of the Palmer grandsons tried to grow the lychee fruit here on a commercial basis. It is a small fruit similar to an apricot and of oriental origin. And we just have those 2 trees left because they are more protected by that big oak tree. But they tried to grow those on a commercial basis here. Out under that tree you'll see some picnic tables. That area is one of the archaeology areas that the kids dig. The school kids use out there for to study the archaeology. Over here, Nancy is building a butterfly garden, and so we're going to have an exhibit for that. Behind us, you'll see Mrs. Palmer had this aqueduct built, and she had a well up here, and she would pump water into it, and it was a source of water for her gardeners. That anytime they needed water here, they could come up and dip it from the aqueduct. It also runs down to the bottom where there is a shell fall, and the water kind of trickles down. That she had it built down there. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Right here we have this fern garden that is right down in there, and just beyond that is this artesian spring that was the fresh water source on the property when the Webbs first came here. It's almost dried up in the now, but it was quite a source of water at the time. This is the horseshoe midden that I told you about. It runs right around here. That's the high point of it, and it runs around on that side, and that comes around this way. And so this is that dump ground that I told you about that earlier when we were over on the other side. Okay, the other thing we have right here is the Guptill house. This is the house that boat builder built. Now, another attraction here is the restroom is right in this end of the house, and the water fountain is kind of on the back side of where the restrooms are. The other attraction here is the jungle walk that goes down that way from the front of the house. And at the bottom of the jungle walk is where the shell fall is with the water trickling down. There's a push button as you walk down there. You can push the button and start the water, and it'll. We don't run it.
To tell us that.
We don't run it from up here, but you can make the water run. I hope that it's attractive today.
It's pretty dry now.
We're going to be here about 10 minutes, and in this time, you can go down in the fern garden if you like. Of course, come into the Guptill house. You can go down the jungle walk. We will meet at the boat building shed that's right down over the hill. So if you don't want to do anything but go down there and pester the boat builders, well, you feel free to do that. But now, the Guptill house was built by Frank for his wife, Lizzie, in 1901. They had been married about 20 years. When they got married, Lizzie's father, John, gave her this 20 acres up here, and she finally got Frank to build her own house. For the first 20 years of their marriage, they lived either in the homestead, where she was a workhorse for the resort, or they slept on one of his boats. All that time, he was building boats around the area, or making trips. He was quite a sailor, so he would haul produce either to Key West or to Manatee. So you'll see in the house, it's quite a work of art. And I'll be inside there, and that's one of the areas that we keep locked unless a docent is there. So you have about 10 minutes here.
Everybody gets recruited back here?
No, I'll just go ahead and
Try from the different angles.
as I said, this was built by Frank. He imported the pine. Notice the light and the dark. Oh, did I start too early?
No, go ahead.
He noticed the alternate light and dark planks that he used. When Mrs. Palmer had this, she used it as a guest house. When she was selling real estate, she invited a lot of people down here to visit. And so she used this as a guest house. She put a wallboard on it, through the nail holes, and she painted all the woodwork white. And so when we wanted to restore this to 1900 or 1901, we took that down and stripped all the paint off of the woodwork.
And you can see it. You can see it in the groups.
Right.
The paint.
The master bedroom.
Was it finished? Was the wood finished originally, or was it just bare wood?
I think it was finished. I don't know just how, but I think it's just about the way it is now. This was the master bedroom. The kitchen and eating dining room table is over in the adjoining. There are 2 bedrooms upstairs that you're welcome to go up and see. As we talked about it earlier, the boat building was really a big item for the pioneer people. And John Webb needed it particularly because he needed to haul people back and forth to Manatee for his Webb Winter Resort. He also needed to bring all his materials, the things that they bought in Manatee, down here. The lumber was a big item that they brought down here by boat. And taking the fruit out, of course, was a major concern. We here at Spanish Point have these guys are all volunteers, and they have built some boats from scratch. Right now they're rebuilding and refinishing some of the boats. But over here, you'll see a small boat that they have a family boat building project that you can come and pay, I think it's $460 for the material, and the volunteers will show you how to build it. And you can take a boat home and you put the finish on it at home, but they'll tell you how. So they've built a lot of these. They do it about once a year, and it takes 5 weekends to put a boat together. One of the boats that they built this past couple years is the Magic. This is the only picture that they had. This was the first motorized boat that John had, and he used this from about 1900 to 1910 or 1908 to carry people back and forth. But this boat is, I would say, half finished. It's up in a boatyard in Sarasota right now.
You said they're gonna bring it back here.
They're bringing it back, and hopefully they're going to finish it right. But this is a all volunteer project now. We had a master boat builder come in and spent 2 seasons with them starting this boat. I don't know whether he's coming back, but also as a member of the Gulf Coast Heritage Association, which I'll talk about a little bit later, you can come down here and schedule a boat ride. on one of the sailboats. Let's go this way. This time is the manatee, or the mangrove. The mangrove bush is very important to the preservation of the coastline of Florida. Consequently, it is protected by law, which you can't cut a mangrove tree down, and it takes a permit to even trim it. What happens is, particularly with the red and the black mangrove, the red mangrove will see some of the trees, they grow out over the water, and then they drop a crop root or crop stem down into the water, and the black manatee, or mangrove, not manatee, mangrove grows as spikes up around this base. And this traps water, or traps the debris from the water, which is a source of fish food, and it also protects the small fish. And then this trapping of this debris just grows the coastline. And as the tide comes in and goes out, well, we get this action that is very, very good and enhances the coastline of Florida. Now, as we go across the bridge, I'll show you some of this red and the black mangrove particularly. The white mangrove grows up back away from the water a little more than the other two. But we have the Lizzie G and Uncle Gabe skiff that are tied up out here. The Lizzie G is the far one, and it is a sailboat, a Sharpie, by design. It was built here on site with all hand tools. They say they'll never do that again, but they tried to use the pioneer method, and they don't like it very well. So the only thing different they used was non-corrosive fasteners, screws and bolts and that sort of thing. The other boat is Uncle Gabe's skiff that they reconditioned here. And they have these two boats. Now, particularly the Lizzie G is the one that they'll take you a ride in if you are a member of the Gulf Coast Heritage Association. Out on the other end of the bridge is a live oyster bed that we'll see as we go across. Okay? This is called the window of the past. It is a cut in the midden. That midden that I told you about that's a quarter-mile long starts down there and runs back to where we were when I first introduced the midden. And it's about 16 feet deep right in here. This was a mistake, but it worked out very well. What happened was that when the Palmers were here, they rented out a house down on the point cottage. And the guy needed a place to park his car. So they just had this dug into the midden. And so we have used it now as a observation point for the layers in there. I like to talk about this map to orientate yourself a little bit here. The water that we see is Little Sarasota Bay. We're located right here. The midden that I'm talking about runs right along this coastline. We're down here. We just came across the bridge that is in this area. So this is north, down that way. This is Casey Key, Siesta Key, Midnight Pass right here, and this is the Little Sarasota Bay. Okay, kind of give yourself a little orientation. So we have this big point of land out here that it's not very wide, as you can see right at this point. Okay, we'll go inside and we'll look at the midden. We have the history book of these prehistoric people that lived on this site, and as time went on, they just would build their shack or their houses, dwellings, right on the remains or the midden, that was created by the people ahead of them, and then they would throw their stuff out, and then they would move their dwelling, and they'd fill in there, and that created these layers and layers of shells. There was found a lot of oyster shells, conch, 14 types of shark, 37 species of fish. Bones were found here. And this was a lot of the work of the Florida Archaeology Department that came down here in the 1959 to 1962 timeframe that did this work. And of course today, any investigation like that is destructive. So we're not doing any of that anymore. We're trying to save this as a part of history. Interestingly, right over here was like a ditch that was dug. You can see this, and then kind of quickly filled in. Here the archaeologists have left us some examples of tools that were found in this mess of stuff. But that was, we think, some 900 to 1,000 years ago that this was filled in. As I said, these people lived here from about 4,000 years ago to 1,000 years ago. Some people say 5,000, but you know, give or take 1,000 years. This was the creation of this midden as it went along. The scientists could tell that the season of the year that the shells were deposited here. They could just tell a lot about the people as they, the formation of the oyster shell, for instance, will differ from one season to another. Okay? Do you have any questions that I might be able to answer about anything that we've talked about? This is the Little Sarasota Bay right here. That's Casey Key right over there. Siesta Key is just north of that. Midnight Pass is right out in that area. Another important thing that I think is kind of interesting about John, being the entrepreneur that he is, he applied for the post office to establish the Osprey Post Office in 1882. He came up with the name Osprey because the application only had room for one word. So he couldn't use Spanish Point. He came up with Osprey. He became the postmaster. They served about 60 families here. It also gave him the communication with the community, that they came to get their mail about twice a week, and they, of course, talked about what's going on in the area. He was the postmaster for 2 years, and then he became a county commissioner, and his wife became postmistress, and he later became a county judge. So he was very, very civic-minded type of individual. Do you have any questions? Mrs. Palmer built this pergola and sunken garden, and planted had the plants planted pretty much as you see them right now. We constantly keep this updated. We have this larva around the edge, and 2 Norfolk Island pines on either side of the sunken garden, and then the red is bougainvillea. And she came up here every afternoon and to have her tea at 4 o'clock. And she invited all her guests to come up here. And we say that this was one of the early real estate offices in the state of Florida, because she was talking real estate. She had this vast amount of land, She had subdivided a lot of it. She was trying to get her northern friends interested in buying this real estate. And interesting enough, the homestead was over there. This house is a white cottage that originally built by Jack, the little son, one of the little children, young son of John. And he chose to leave. And so he sold it back to Dad, and Dad remodeled that and made it the guest house for the Web Winter Resort. So they had a homestead over there, they had a guest house here, they had a three-hole privilege right here. So when Mrs. Palmer built this, she built a mushroom garden down below. In the pond, she tried to have goldfish. And she couldn't understand what happened to goldfish until they found two well-fed snakes in the pond. This is available today for ceremonies. The other thing I wanted to point out was the chapel was available today for weddings and sometimes this is used for weddings. In the last 2 years, this has been completely redone, and we have it decorated in the 50s right now with these displays about Mrs. Palmer around the sides. As I said, she was an interesting lady who was well-traveled and well-connected and had lots of money. Over in this corner, you might be interested, that is where a picture of the Oaks, which sat down there north of the property line, north of the shelf wall, if you went down there. You might have seen that picture. Notice the urns, when you look at that picture, notice the urns that are in there. Interestingly, Jack was the one member of the family that was not buried here on site with the rest of the family. He married a local girl whose father, the girl's father, was a local doctor. He got involved in a vigilante squabble, I might say, and he was in jail. He escaped from jail and left the area, and they think that he went to California and that Jack and his family followed them out to California to be with them. Jack came back to help settle the family estate, but that's the only time he came back to this area.
What date was that?
I think it was around 1884, 1885 when he left, something on that order. He came back in 1910, when, or in the 1908 to 1910 time frame after his father and stepmother had passed away. Okay. You know, they hired very few. There were, I think, that they did have some.
The Webbs, I'm talking about the Webbs.
Yes, the Webbs. I think that the Webbs used some black people that moved in after the Civil War, particularly. However, I was told that they can't really substantiate that. They do know that there was 2 women that were hired primarily to work in the cooking and cleaning and that sort of thing. The tour is going to end right here. You can spend as much time as you want on the property. You can go back down to the window of the past if you want to study that, or go over and test your boat builders, or anything you want to see that I haven't opened or unlocked the door for. I need to say a little more about the Gulf Coast Heritage Association. It operates this as a museum, and we have a membership available for individuals for half price. And there are special events that we invite you to. And one of the things that the members right now are encouraged to do, and that is to schedule a boat ride. That you can get a ride on that Lizzie G. The boat builders are qualified captains. They have passed the Coast Guard requirements for sailing captains. My wife and I did this last year, and it was a delightful 2 hours to go out on the bay, go up towards Sarasota, and then come back. One of the advantages to the association. Also, we are in constant need of volunteers. The front gate is a volunteer. The gift shop, if you talk to that lady, she was a volunteer along with the ladies at the front desk. And a lot of the landscaping is done by volunteers. We have about 6 or 7 employees. We saw Nancy flash by a couple times. She's the site horticulturist. Karen is the site curator. And then we have an education director, an executive director, and some office people and that sort of thing. But as I said, there's about 200 of us that volunteer. If you live in the area and have, even for a short period of time, seasonal is good also, because we need extra people during the season, January, February, March. If you have as little as 4 hours a week, we would like to encourage you to look into volunteering. I think you would enjoy it. Do you have any questions?
How do we get back?
What?
How do we get back?
How do we get back? Okay, you can walk right down this path. That'll bring you out to that intersection where I introduced Mrs. Webb. The parking lot is up to the left there, either path back up to the road or the path. I'm sorry I didn't point it out, the packing house, you can see it right over in here when you're out on the lawn. So we've just made this full circle.
Okay.
Okay. Good question, thank you. Any other questions, folks?
Thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you very much for your attention, and I enjoyed the tour this morning.
Very good job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.